Hi, good morning, and welcome to the ZP Sense It All webinar. So this webinar is not going to be all about talk. In fact, I do have some hardware in front of me, so I will be doing a live demo, and I'm actually going to do it slightly unusually. So I'm sort of sharing my screen with you at the moment. I'll just go back to that main monitor and say we are going to talk about Sense It All. I'm going to talk about our vision at ZP to really accelerate the development of assays and get them onto the market. I think too many people spend too long actually trying things out and actually not necessarily everything actually getting to the market, and that's the problem that we're going to try and solve. With this slide, I'm basically just immediately saying, okay, rather than talking about this, I might actually just jump straight into a demonstration now. So what I'll do is I'll change my screen to my desk in front of me. I'll show you what we're talking about, and then maybe I'll then talk about in detail more about the system. But I think sort of seeing is probably one of the best ways of let's say understanding. So with that said, I've stopped sharing my screen. You can hopefully now see my, let's say, my main screen here, and I will basically do a quick demonstration. So this is the Sense It All. The Sense It All, it can either be a research instrument. So by a research instrument, I've got these QR codes in front of me. I'll explain the whole app situation shortly, but different QR codes allow me to change the target of what this essentially is, a potentiostat. So it can act as a scientific instrument, or it can act as an actual product. Now, the reason it can act as an actual product is that it's actually synchronized with the cloud, and in the cloud we have something called a data pipe, and a data pipe will allow us to take raw signal from techniques like amperometry, open circuit potentiometry, impedance spectroscopy, linear sweep, cyclovoltammetry, square wave voltammetry. It allows us to take those, put it through a data pipe, which I'll show you, and actually then turn it into something like chili, ginger, pH, nitrate, total antioxidative capacity, glucose, potassium, testosterone. So as I say, I don't want to talk at you. I want to actually just demonstrate. So I've got the app up in front of me at the moment. I've got the hardware in front of me here. The hardware is actually on. The device is connected. The app has told me. I'll tell you where to get the app in a short while. I'll take a sensor and I'll do a run. I'll put the sensor essentially into that. Now, this is an OEM platform. This means that you do not have to do things that ZP has done, but you can build products and services upon it. So, for example, we've got a client at the moment who wants to do water quality testing. He knows that we can do anodic stripping voltammetry on this device, and therefore he's using it. He's going to use it for the testing of lead. It means that traditionally he would have actually built this hardware, built the sensors, built the app, and actually that would have taken 5 to 10 to 15 years. And now he's on third unit with us. When I say unit, third one of these on us, and he's done it extremely quickly. He only decided to pull the trigger, let's say, in the summer. Enough, I don't want to say waffle from me, but enough. So I'll take a sample, I'll put it on there. So what I'll do is I'll just make sure I know where the sample's going. I'm going to give it a name because it's for me, it goes up to the cloud. See, so I want to be able to find it in a short while. The lovely thing about electrochemistry is it does allow you to put small samples on. That's only 50 microliters. I'm just going to tell it the dilution. If you're doing complex samples and you're working with ZP, we can teach you how to, the joys of how dilution can really help you. The nice thing is you get a kind of I'm not expecting my end users to always understand my, let's say, raw signal, and don't think that I'm going to leave them hanging with raw signal. It does just give me a nice idea that actually everything is, let's say, working correctly, that I can actually see that raw signal. So now what I have here is I'm first of all going to hold it up to here. It gives you some really nice indications. The raw signal was actually processing in real time, but real end users don't want to know, the open circuit potential for that phosphate sensor was this, or the open circuit potential for that potassium sensor was this, or the peak height for that pharmaceutical molecule was this. They actually don't want that. They actually want concentration. So in this particular case, that concentration is 9,320 micromolar. now what I'm going to do is actually change cameras for a second, and also change screens for a second, because it did say upload is complete, and this system actually works in super collaboration with a cloud system that we have called Julie. Don't think of this as being restricted to just things that we're interested in. You can actually use this entire platform for things that you are interested in. So I can see my data now. It's gone up. When it said upload complete on my phone, upload complete on my phone actually meant it had gone up to here, and I can see that data there here now, and I'll just go into it. So I can see now I'm in the data. I can see the raw signal. So that was tracking in front of me in real time whilst that assay was running. But I wasn't, you can't interpret that in real time, but actually the raw signal did go up there. I got that concentration, 9,320 that we reported on the app, and you can see the raw signal. So if you're so into, and I'm not expecting you to be into your electrochemistry, but the raw signal is up here, the results are up here. And if you think about most scientific papers, most European projects, most development, especially when in the world of electrochemical sensing technologies, people are often just left with raw signal. But what this has done is it's actually got a data pipe built into it. So if I go into my tools and what I do, we tell it to pre-process the data, do what's called a low pass filter on the data. It didn't really need it. The data was actually already pretty clean. We told it to show the extracted value, which we did. We told it to center it's basically doing a peak. First it's finding the peak, and then first finding the peak, then measuring the height. So we tell it where to look for the peak, and then we tell it to fit it to this equation, which is really the calibration factor. And then we tell it what the dilution factor was. When I was doing that assay, I actually told it, and I didn't make that very clear to you, but I'd already prepared the sample by doing a 1 in 100 dilution. So it knew where to look. It then knew how to turn peak height into, because it was peak height, into essentially concentration. It then knew how to take care of my sample prep, which involved a 1 in 100 dilution, because that was in the app. And then it did all those calculations in the cloud and sent the result back to the phone. So the end user gets a end user experience, but in fact, all the processing was taking place in this cloud. And understand that that's a real advantage. For example, we ship this particular assay for measuring the capsaicin in chilies all around the world. And we haven't yet had a problem with actually doing the processing in the cloud, because the world is actually so connected these days that those days of worrying about connectivity is kind of over. And it does allow you to actually, if you can ever improve your algorithms, you can actually then just put in new algorithms and improve the data processing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slightly back off now and actually now talk about, let's do the presentation now. So the presentation now will tell you about those details. But if I was to summarize that, I did a live demonstration. I took one of our electrodes. I put a sample on it. The app, I told it to run one of the applications on that app by using the QR code. It ran it. It sent the data to the cloud. It processed the data and sent a result back to the phone. Now, once upon a time, people would have to build entire technology stacks in order to do all that. And now it's actually much more available. So now let's go back to the boring part. Hello, welcome to Zimmer & Peacock. We were launched in 2014. I just want to give you a bit of a perspective on this. We are ISO 13485, so a lot of what we do is contract development, contract manufacturing. We produce a lot of screen printed electrodes, for example. I think we're one of the few places that actually does a lot of, we actually use cyclovoltammetry when we're characterizing those electrodes that we manufacture to make sure that they're repeatable. Why do we do that? Because we use them in our own products. And so we sort of we got an extra degree of wishing our stuff to be good, because in fact we use it ourselves, which makes us quite unusual. The team is not too big, not too large. Today I'm going to talk about commercialization. So this particular webinar, even though the instrument that I have in front of me is in part a potentiostat, so our academic colleagues can use it, our development colleagues can use it. I'm going to have a slightly different emphasis today, which is I'm more interested in talking about how it can accelerate ideas onto the market, or at least into alpha and beta users much earlier on. For example, this is actually used in hospitals. if you gave nurses raw signals, they would it's just not fair. You can't give them raw signals. It's not going to give them a good enough experience. But of course, we can actually turn raw signal into concentration so quickly. So I'm very interested in commercialization. I'll talk. I think that most research actually finishes at what's called technology readiness level number 3, and this really allows us to get to technology readiness level number 9. The thing that might be holding it back is the actual assay itself or the sensor itself. But in terms of a technology stack, it's very matured. I say he would do a demo, but I decided to do the demo up front because I think it's then more impactful and you understand why I'm talking about this. Today, I'm actually only focusing on point of need and in point of need or point of care diagnostics. We do webinars specifically on wearables. I do have a wearable technology in front of me. I'm always trying to say to people, if you're starting a company, just understand that wearables are about 10 times more complicated than doing a discrete test. When I say a discrete test, when I put that sample on there and I got a result immediately, that was a discrete test. If I want to continuously monitor the glucose in my body using something like a microneedle array like this, then that is a much harder program, and the funding required is easily 10x what it would, if I was making a blood glucose strip these days, that's actually very easy. But if I was making a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, that's actually very hard. So today I'm not going to talk about wearables, but if you are interested in wearables, we will do a webinar on the 1st of October, and we do one in the morning, one in the afternoon. It helps cover all the global time zones that we are facing. If you're interested in point of need testing, if you've got colleagues who think that demo I just did and this webinar that I'm about to give are interesting, we'll repeat it on the 22nd of October, which is more or less a month from now. So we do have a kind of routine on this. Just FYI, if what you're hearing and you want to learn a bit deeper from Zimmer and Peacock, we are actually doing a in-person workshops, and this is not just talking. This will be real demos. There's at least 6 demos that you will do, that we will do in November. So wearables, point of need testing will be covered. Norway, so we're not so far from Oslo. You can just get a quick train from the airport down to Trondheim. Actually it's Tonsberg, sorry. And it's on the 20th and 21st of November, and I'll lead it. Right. So we had a data pipe. I was showing you something that we took a sensor, we put it into the meter. I put the 50 microliter drop on there. That's one of the best things about electrochemistry is sample size. And also samples can be quite messy as well. Let's see if I've got a messy sample in front of me. Yeah, this is a messy sample. This is a sample. I did a 1 in 10 dilution with this one. I can test it. It's so rich in the compound of interest that actually I need to dilute it more. But I could test that, and you can see that that's quite opaque. So if you're trying to do things like water testing, etc., when you're measuring using colorimetric assays or spectroscopy assays, or at least photospectroscopy assays, they have to be quite transparent often. With electrochemistry, you can test blood. Obviously, that's the classic glucose strip. They do not need to be particularly clean. When I did that test, I actually have a whole array of QR codes in front of me. So this system is not menu driven. It's actually QR code driven. The QR code tells the app what to do. The app runs the meter. The meter essentially energizes, let's say, the sensor. On the sensor, there's the liquid sample. So we get some information or data out of that sample, I should say. The data in my particular case was cyclovoltammetry, which can be quite complicated, and you can't ask real people to interpret that. But because of the data pipe that exists in a system called Julie, we were actually able to pre-process it, process it, turn it through using the calibration into information, and actually send it back to the phone and give a real user experience. So I think there's lots of people making lots of electronics, which lots of people in academia and startups are using. But these instruments are actually, when you look at the way they operate, they're actually sort of 20-year-old legacies and greater on them. If you were to redesign it today and think about what's the real problem I'm trying to solve, there's a real problem I'm trying to solve actually to make, bigger and greater potential stats. That's not really the problem. The problem is many of these assays are never leaving the lab and get into the real world people interested in water quality, people interested in human health, people interested in food quality. These are the real beneficiaries. And if you want to financially benefit from it, you have to be facing those people. And this is what this technology stack is all about. And I should have finished it by saying, of course, and then the information came back to the phone. So my end users never have to look at my cloud, but it's nice because actually the data is always there. So when you're trying to, you know, do water quality testing in deep bores, water bores in, I want to say Afghanistan, but maybe Pakistan or somewhere like that. Um, you can do that. They can do that rather remotely from you. The data goes to the cloud, and you can do some quality checking yourselves, you know, even remotely. So we just FYI, I'll send you a recording of this, but that app that I'm using is not some hidden app somewhere. This app has been developed to the standard that it's actually on the Google Play Store, so we're Android compatible. It's also on the App Store, so and that's to get onto the Apple App Store is another level of quality required and diligence required. So it's actually both works with iPhones or iOS systems, and it works with Android systems as well. You can try this for yourself if you use those two QR codes. I know they went quite quickly, but I'll send you a recording later on. You can scan those QR codes, at which point then it'll install an app and you won't have an account. It says don't have an account. You know, it's a question. So, and you will therefore set up an account. But understand that when you register that account, you're actually registering both in the app, but the app is a portal to a cloud system called Julie. So the app will reside on your phone. And when you run assays using the app, it'd be very hard for you to run assays because you won't have the hardware. But just know that that app is actually synchronous with a cloud system. So everything that happens through the app is all sent to the cloud. So it's important to see because when you register that account, you'll have you'll set up essentially an email and a password, and just understand that you can go and later on log in and find all the raw data and all the history of all the tests by just going to julie.zimmerpeacock.no. And when you log in there, you're going to say, oh, that's all the tests I ever did. And I didn't really actually, and I realized I did that quick demo, but I'm actually going to break for a second and realize that this says the session's timed out, but hopefully I can come back in now because I should have actually done I was a little bit quick on it. That I've got all these tests that I've been doing, but this platform is extremely powerful. I'm just going to delete that for a second. And what I want to do is I want to pretend, and what I'll do is I'm just going to choose, whoops a daisy. I'm just going to pretend for a second. What I'm going to do is go into here. So let's say you are monitoring, you know, this is like the end user experience. So let's say the end user had been monitoring some analyte out in the field, and they wanted to actually compare how that analyte was tracking with time. I can take all these individual tests, and I can compare I can actually compare individual tests, which it's now doing, and it will come now, as he says. But what it'll do is it's actually going to look at all those individual tests and track them. So I can see I had 100,000 here, 40,000 here, 50,000 here, about 43,000 here. So there's a lot of analytics also possible in that cloud that all been built. I should also mention it's actually got an API built into it as well. If you're not clear on an API is that kind of language that allows one, let's say, online service to talk to another online service. I will try slightly change gears and go back because I suppose I was bringing that up because I actually wanted to emphasize that all the data is actually going to Julie. In fact, when it was happened, who did it, even geolocations in there these days. And you can compare reports as well. So Julie is a pretty powerful engine. You don't want to put all that onto an app because that's actually, you know, the app screen is really just for gathering the data in the first place, but analysis later on is also possible. And as I say, these two things are synchronized. You can try for yourself, but you'll only have a certain amount of trying because you won't have hardware. When you log in, the first thing that it's going to want to do, and I might, is when I log in, it actually wants to access my camera because it wants to scan a QR code. It wants to know, are you going to use me as a potentiostat? Are you going to want to do amperometry, open circuit potentiometry, EIS, linear sweep, open circuit potential, cyclic voltammetry, square wave voltammetry? or do you want to do an actual analyte? Do you want to do nitrate, phosphate, potassium? Do you want to do pH? Do you want to do glucose, etc.? I suspect that most of you will end up building either your own sensor or your own application upon one of our sensors. So, for example, if we've got a nitrate sensor, let's say potassium, that's a very mature sensor for us. If we have a potassium sensor, yeah, it works perfectly well. But most of our work will be in potassium in blood or potassium in dialysis solution. Your potassium could be in runoff from a field or something. That is a different application and will end up with its own sample preparation, and it will end up with its own algorithm. If you're joining late, don't worry about it. Everything is being recorded. I did do a live demonstration where I took a sample, put it on the sensor, ran the meter, sent the data to the cloud, and showed the guys that the data's in the cloud. But so when you first log into the app, it's going to want to access one of many QR codes. The whole system is, in the end, as I say, is actually designed really to get either startups or academic research out of those technology readiness level number 3 levels and actually get it to the and get the data to the cloud. So amperometry is one of the QR codes, so it can be used as a potentiostat, open circuit potentiometry, EIS. You use EIS for things like proteins, etc. Amperometry, things like oxidase enzyme assays, dehydrogenase enzyme assays. Linear sweep voltammetry, you could do it for small molecule detection. Cyclic voltammetry, we use it under license, and there's IP behind it for capsaicin detection. Square wave voltammetry, very sensitive technique, useful small molecules, also for immunoassays as well. But because of that data pipe that I showed you, you saw that actually, even though I did cyclic voltammetry as the analytical technique, I actually gave somebody really the concentration of capsaicin because it went through the data pipe. And so I think this is one of the first times in history, or maybe this is the first product of its type or service of its type, where electrochemical raw signal can go to the cloud, get processed through a data pipe. And to be honest with you, that data pipe is not at all, I'll just discard these changes. That data pipe is not hard. It's not programming. It's actually sort of selecting, what filter shall I use? There's more filters than you could ever do. Outlier rejection, show extracted data, where to look, here's the algorithm. This is not coding. This is really just selecting or entering values into fields. So it certainly speeds up the development path a little bit. We do have a lot of sensors existing. Even though if we have a sensor, it doesn't mean it would necessarily work in your application. To make a sensor work in a new application, it has to be characterized in those samples. So if I was measuring glucose in food, that would have a certain sensitivity. If I was measuring glucose in blood, the sensor may have a different sensitivity, and you would have to do that characterization. So even if we got the sensor, you may still have to do some characterization work on that. But we do have a lot of these sensors, and everyone that's rotating is already on the app. Now I'm going to talk about commercialization. I'm going to talk about the problem that's either in startups or also in startups and academia, the sort of valley of death. People were talking about this valley of death 20 years ago. And if a problem is not being solved, then the way which people are trying to solve it is obviously not working. So I think at ZP, actually, we had a kind of an epiphany, really, of how to actually solve this valley of death problem in the world of specifically electrochemical assays, electrochemical sensors, and electrochemical biosensors. So let me describe the valley of death. Somebody's doing some development either in academia or in a startup company or research. They're often using instruments that are ugly, full of cables, maybe large, but not necessarily large, maybe have awkward slots on them, etc. So these are not user-friendly instruments. I would argue that the demonstration that you saw earlier on, that was a really elegant, user experience. I can take that sensor out, I can put it back in. It's just clicking, no awkward slots. This has got LEDs on the front of it that guide that kind of user experience. You saw how, let's say, smooth the actual app was. So at the moment, a lot of research is taking place on instruments that are dedicated to the R&D effort. And they've got a 20-year legacy on them, most of these instruments. So in fact, they're really talking about technologies that some of these technologies are almost pre-internet. They're certainly Windows based. They're not thinking about, people who are actually much more used to using their phones these days, and they're never ever thinking about the application of that science. They're dedicated to the generation of that data, but not the translation of that data out to the research. So I think that's what's holding actually back a lot of research. That all that research is happening on instruments that are fit for purpose for R&D, but there's actually no way of translating that assay rapidly into the real world. So you've got entrepreneurs and companies that actually do want to do that translation. And so we're saying, okay, here's one instrument that by the use of QR codes, I can either run amperometry on it, I could do cyclovoltammetry on it, or I could do potassium on it. So suddenly it can go from lab experiment to actual analyte very quickly. And so this valley of death describes the idea that actually most research, whether it's in academia or commercial, actually finishes at TRL3, technology readiness level number 3, some sort of proof of principle. But really to be commercial, you have to get to a much higher technology readiness level, TRL9. And governments, both US, Europe, Asia, people have put governments try to put a lot of money in closing this gap. But actually, I think we're going about this the wrong way. At ZP, we're closing that gap by literally making the same instrument that would otherwise be used for doing research is also the same instrument that can actually be used for commercialization as well. So if you look at the technology industry, in the technology industry, people are always building services upon each other's technology stacks. But actually, in the deep science industry, like biosensor development, people make their own sensors, they make their own electronics, they make their own apps. But I actually think that we'll be more successful if we think of ourselves actually as app developers. So, we've made a platform of one which people can develop. When I say apps, I don't just mean software applications. I mean, that there's also all the science as well that needs to go around that. So they're applications, but they're upon a platform. So rather than having this big gap between what happens in the lab and what happens in the real world, you can try and bridge that gap with funding, which has been happening for more than 20 years, but actually it's not that successful, because I think in my domain of electro-analytical sciences, there's like 25,000 papers produced per annum. And how many of those spin out into any kind of product? I think it's less than 1% by a long way. It's less than 1%. How do you close the gap? Actually, you don't need to pour as much money in. Actually, you could actually to close the gap by making the instruments between lab and the real world actually the same instrument. And it's much more inspiring to scientists and students and PhDs and postdocs when they're using an instrument that actually looks like a product, because then they can imagine how the end user will actually use that instrument. So this is an OEM technology from ZP. We're saying to people, if we don't have the sensor, then you will develop the sensor. But in fact, we've developed a very easy to use, very reproducible screen printed electrode, which really speeds up the development. A lot of what's holding up a lot of research actually, and development, is irreproducibility in screen printed electrodes. That's something that we've really worked upon. So it does leave you with hard challenges like, what is that assay? What is the method of excitation? Are you going to use square wave voltammetry, amperometry? You have to optimize that. And then what's that calibration routine? How are you going to turn that, in this case, peak height into current? Sorry, not current, into concentration. But these are things that you would do anyway, except if you do them on this instrument, you can then release it as a product on this instrument as well. So it really closes the gap. As I say, you can get hold of this app. You can scan this QR code or this QR code. This is being recorded, so I can see your all of you who are here today will just get me. I'll send you a video shortly. When I say commercialization as well, this is an important QR code. If you scan this QR code, you're going to understand that actually ZP is trying to be a true platform. And that means that you'll be able to edit this title, you'll be able to edit that logo, you'll be able to edit this color scheme, you'll be able to give it your own sensor name. All these fields all become essentially your fields. So you can understand that, in fact, ZP is is in the background. Let's say it's kind of, I'd like to say it's like running on an Amazon server or Google server, um, or maybe an Oracle server. It's not clear to the end user that you are, but you're running upon this platform. Why would you do this? Because you're going to go from taking 5, 10, 15 years and probably having a 10% probability of success to being able to do this in 2 years. It's much better to try something and not be successful in 2 years than to try something and not be successful over the course of 15 years. It could be half your career, let's say. So in summary, and I've actually come to essentially the end of it now. So we're trying at ZP, and I think the demonstration I did earlier on was to show you that how robust this is. We have a platform upon which you can develop assays, or you can use one of our existing sensors. But if it's our existing sensors, you may still have to characterize them in your particular application. But we think that the platform allows you to go much quicker from TRL3, which is really the gravestone of most development, that people really don't get it out of the lab, to a much higher technology readiness level, because in fact it's much easier. And I did do a demonstration of it as well. Because one of you came in slightly late, I'll just do that. I'll just do a quick demonstration again, but this is a repeat. So if you've already seen this, no particular issues. I'm just trying to figure out which camera to go to. So I'm just going to do a quick demonstration to show you that this is super easy. So I will take a sensor. I will put the sensor on there. I will, I've got a couple of samples here. Yeah, I'll take this one. Take this sample. I will put it, I'm just going to give this a name, which I will do now. And I will put the sample on the sensor. Repetition of statement from earlier on, but I do love this about electrochemistry. Samples do not have to be large for electrochemistry, and they also don't have to be particularly beautiful either. This is not a beautiful sample. It's quite cloudy, in fact. That said, let me put the sample on. I realize I didn't actually close that, so I'm going to close that now. So that's made electrical contact. I will go to continue. I will tell it the dilution that I used to prepare that sample. I'll start the measurement. And now it's, the user gets some expectation that this is actually running. So it's running. When I say like that, you get that. Of course, I'm not expecting the end user to actually have it any way interpreted that signal. But what I am doing, and I'll just change my cameras for a second here, is the crazy thing is, and I'm sorry that that's a bit bright. It says upload complete. You get a nice picture of the cloud, and it gives you the concentration. It actually processed all that data in the cloud and sent it back in real time. And I'll just go back to my, I'm going to share my screen with you just to give you that final look. Share here. Yeah, here it goes. Let me share, which I will do. Just try to remember where the share button is. All right, cool. And that was a test that I just did, and it just went up to the cloud. I can see the time and date. It's using universal coordinated time. I can see who did it. I can see the raw signals. I can see the process data, and I can see the result that also was sent back to the phone. So I think I just did that just because we had somebody just join at the end. But I want to say thank you. If you've got any questions of ZP, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. If you're interested in wearables, there's a wearables webinar equivalent to this on the 1st of October. But this webinar really was all about, this is a platform. It's at a very high technology readiness level, the openness of it, and it means that you can actually develop assays for it or take sensors that we already have and use them on it in new applications. And I feel like this is a real 2024 technology. It doesn't have the historical legacies of Windows-based equipment, etc. If you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Okay, thanks very much.